What's up, Cryptosomniacs? This is Jason here with another interview for you today. Now, first I need to tell you that this was a sponsored interview. We do this sort of thing to help keep the channel going. We're not directly endorsing or recommending a purchase of any of this sort of stuff. This is just for educational purposes. But with that said, after looking into this project, I find it to be fascinating. It's one of the first blockchain projects that has been developing its own technology rather than launching on another one and then migrating blockchains later. There's some very interesting team members, one of which is Silvio Macaulay. Now, this guy is very impressive. He has been an MIT faculty member since 1983. He is the founder of Algorand and co-inventor of ZK Snarks, which is a very important privacy protocol within the cryptocurrency space. You can read up on him over on their website. The links are down below. The person that I am sitting down with today is Steve Kokinos. Steve is a serial entrepreneur, several successful exits or acquisitions by his previous companies. He's involved in tech since the inception of the internet. Very interesting guy. Came from a musical background and ended up moving into tech. So we're going to talk a little bit about his story. And before we jump into this, I do want to clarify, Algorand, the company, is the company that is building the technology and implementing it within the market. Algorand Foundation is the entity that is managing the assets and dealing with the token sale. So they are two separate entities. Just wanted to clear that up right up front. Again, you can learn more about them down on the links below. And other than that, I hope you guys enjoy this interview. Let's go ahead and jump. What is happening, Cryptosomniacs? This is Jason, and today I am here with Steve Kokinos from Algorand, hot new blockchain project. A lot of interest going around on the internet about this right now, and I got to talk to the CEO, the man himself. So, Steve, do you want to just give a brief intro on your background? Tell them who you are.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for having me. I was fortunate to meet Silvio about a year and a half ago. And Silvio Macaulay is the founder of the project and Turing Prize-winning cryptographer. Prior to that, I was the founder and ran a company called Fuse for over a decade, which is a collaboration and communication platform for enterprises, and started several other companies before that we either sold or took public. So it's been a real adventure. I'm new to crypto, but I think really got my start in the early days of the internet. Built one of the first infrastructure companies, and what kind of really struck me was sort of the dynamism of the market and kind of the whole movement, and seemed had to have a lot of similarities to the early days of the internet. Really, I think has world-changing possibilities for sure.
Awesome, man. So that's all good info. I was going to actually ask you, when did you get involved in crypto? How did you get so let me ask you this. This is just a standard question I ask everybody. When did you buy your first Bitcoin or other alternative cryptocurrency? And if it wasn't Bitcoin, what was it?
I actually started, I'd been interested for a little while, but didn't really have a lot of time on my hands. So it was really kind of the beginning of 2017 that actually didn't buy my first Bitcoin or altcoins. I mined them. So set up some, mining gear in my basement along with my kids, and really set out just sort of learning the tech and understanding what was going on kind of behind the scenes. I thought it was really fascinating. And I think the more I dug into it, the more you realize that there's a lot to unpack, both from kind of a technology standpoint and definitely from a market standpoint also. Agreed.
It is a complicated animal. And it seems like it's one of those things that as soon as you get as soon as it gets its hooks in you fall down the rabbit hole, and there's so much to learn. I know 2017 was when a lot of people came into the space, and I was in like late 2016, early 2017 myself. So I spent a whole lot of time reading different books and scouring the internet, trying to learn about the blockchain. And I agree, it does seem to be potentially world-changing tech. So on that note, there's been a lot of promises about what crypto is going to do, and there's some critics that say it's unfulfilled so far. So do you think that it is a longer stage thing that's going on, or do you think that this is something like what do you think the time horizon is for when we gain adoption and things?
Well, I think the idea that it's some of the promise I think has been fulfilled. I think if you the interest in Bitcoin, I think if you look at the interest in kind of the market in general, and especially globally, I think there's very interesting dynamics that have happened. I think if anyone was going to try to claim that this has reached the mainstream and is used by everyone every day, I mean, obviously that's not true. So there's a long way to go. At the same time, I don't want to overuse kind of internet comparisons, but if you look at the internet in the mid 90s, when people were using dial-up modems and the tech was very rudimentary, I think it would have been a little bit hard to kind of imagine people watching TV on their phones in the back of an Uber, as they're going around. So I think definitely, that's taken 20 years, almost 25 years to really kind of, I'd say change the way a lot of things happen in the world. And I think it's, this is a long-term project. I think long-term kind of, it's a long-term event to kind of shift how people exchange money and exchange value. And I think it's not going to happen overnight, but I think it also, just like was needed in kind of other movements, the infrastructure needs to be in place, the hard science has to be solved, and there need to be platforms that can scale to being used by hundreds of millions or billions of people. And I think, that's what we really feel Algorand represents. And we see a number of other kind of projects coming out that we think are trying to tackle, problem in different ways and attack different parts of the market. So I think it's really encouraging that, one, we have kind of first generation tech that's really captured people's imagination and done as well as it has. But I think definitely there's going to need to be a wave of kind of next gen tech that gets rolled out now that can bring more utility to the market and really help it grow. So I think it's an exciting time where, we're getting toward an inflection point where I think we can expect to see a lot more people starting to use crypto platforms in the near future.
I agree. I noticed there was a lot of really good ideas in 2017 that I think were a bit ahead of their time. And I don't mean necessarily that they were so advanced they were ahead of their time, more to the fact that it was a great application for the usage of blockchain, but just without the widespread adoption, it was just a little bit early to the game. It would have been like inventing YouTube before, or I don't know if that's a good analogy, but inventing messaging systems and imagining, like what we have with YouTube, you said it yourself, the way that the internet has progressed was massive. And especially I think once the smartphone was invented, I grew up when the internet was new and have seen it become what it is now. And I think really where the internet took off was with the smartphone invention myself.
I think it was kind of a multi-phase sort of thing. I think even before that, there needed to be bandwidth, right? And so, the internet backbone, it was very decentralized, and there was a lot of, what would have been or similar to nodes in kind of the blockchain space, but they weren't very fast. You couldn't, send a lot of data. And I think once those networks got upgraded, and then mobile phones came in, and the speed of mobile data improved, I think there's been kind of just successive waves of kind of innovation that have happened as the infrastructure came up to speed and kept pace with what people needed to do.
Agreed. So just to back off before we jump heavy into the tech stuff, I was watching a couple of other interviews with you, and two things that, so I know you have a music background, you were a guitarist, and you had mentioned in this interview that you were into electronic music before it was really a thing. I also am an electronic music producer, so that's pretty cool to me.
Nice.
And then specifically, I wanted to know, how did you get from being a musician / music major into tech? Because I know you were pretty early in the tech space. So how did that transition? How did that transition occur?
Yeah. So for me, it's a good question. I get asked it a lot. For me, electronic music was very computer centric at the time. And there's a lot of theory involved, especially computer science. And so, part of getting into the nuts and bolts of how you created electronic music in the early 90s was you had to learn how to program and do some other things. And so for me, I was like, well, I like music, but also, if you really have to understand computer science in order to be into electronic music, then maybe I should go spend some time on that. And so ultimately, I think that was kind of a gateway to the tech world for me. I think from like an entrepreneurial standpoint, there's a lot of similarities in terms of the creativity and problem solving skills that you learn in music as you need in kind of business. So I think they're not such different disciplines as you might think at first glance.
I agree. After all music is math, really, in one form or another. So, so I wanted to address. I had heard a rumor. So let's get into adoption a little bit. So, two things. One, I want your hot take on Facebook entering the crypto space with the Libra coin. Do you think that's a good thing, given that they have such a broad user base already? And then the second part of that question is, I heard a rumor that they were interested in Algorand, and Algorand had decided to decline and continue to try to operate in a decentralized manner, which I think is applaudable. So if you could speak to both of those 2 points, I would appreciate it.
Yeah, sure. Well, I'll start with the second one first, which is, we don't comment on rumors. So, that's all I have to say about that. On the other side, I think that the fact that, Facebook is decided to bring a currency into the market is very interesting. They obviously have an enormous platform to generate awareness and interest. And so I think from that side, it's definitely a positive. And, like we talked about earlier, moving from, the 30, 40 million users that are already in the crypto space today to a couple billion that the Facebooks and Googles of the world have, I think is something that needs to happen over the, next decade or so if there's really going to be an impact on the world. So I think that it's definitely a positive from that standpoint. On the flip side, if you look at what a project like Algorand represents, we've been focused from day one on building a public permissionless network. We think that having networks that can't be censored, that aren't controlled by any one party, are all very important, and having that built into the protocol from kind of day one is crucial. And I think that given all of the privacy and security concerns that exist out there today, across many of the big tech giants, I think there's definitely a question as to whether a group of companies that are largely some of the biggest data brokers and holders of personal information out there ought to be the ones that are also controlling people's money. So I think those are questions that the market has to figure out, but I think there's sort of a big positive on one side and definitely some sort of cautionary concerns on the other side. I guess we'll see how the market plays that out.
I talk about that often, that adoption's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take steps. A lot of people, like, the hardcore crypto people are like, all decentralization all the time. But ultimately, most people are used to be able to call their bank or call their credit card company if there's an issue with a processing fee, et cetera, et cetera. So I think there is definitely going to be a time horizon for people to become used to the fact that they have to be personally responsible for their finances, which I think probably is a good thing by and large for society in the long run. But yeah, there's got to be steps to adoption. So I'm kind of a toss-up on the centralized coins, Ripple, et cetera, et cetera. Like they seem like they might onboard more people faster, in my opinion. But again, I think decentralization is the ultimate goal.
I think if you take a step back and you just look at the recent wave in cloud computing, if you rewind, 6, 7, 8 years ago, the idea that big enterprises and people would deploy their applications on a platform like Amazon Web Services, people would have thought you're crazy. They had servers and server rooms and private data centers, and they would buy software. I think now you come into the modern, you fast forward to today, and it'd be sort of laughable to not. And so I think whenever there's a new technology, and I think blockchain is no exception, there's often an inclination early on to try to centralize things and to try to create private networks to get a better understanding of it. And I think we see that not only with projects like Ripple, but I'd say even more so with Hyperledger, IBM's project. And I think it's good for people to get exposed to technology. I think, though, there's an education curve that just has to happen. And I think definitely, as was the case with the shift from private to public cloud networks and cloud and infrastructure and the efficiencies that people gain there, we think that overall, kind of the right answer for the world are public permissionless networks and blockchains. And I think definitely we see part of our responsibility is educating people on why that's ultimately a good thing and the right way to deploy their applications. And I think, we're seeing more and more that people, I think, really are starting to understand the fundamental benefits of decentralization. So it's exciting to see.
Agreed. That actually speaks to another question I had. Is I wanted to ask specifically.
Why do you from one to another? This is great.
Yeah, sure. It's great. So yeah, I wanted to ask. Speaking of permission blockchains like Hyperledger, or say take the example of Stellar or Ripple, both of those are trying to be sort of a blockchain for business, dealing with scalability, et cetera, et cetera. So let's just start talking about Algorand. Why is Algorand a better solution for a business looking to incorporate blockchain into their business model than some of the existing solutions?
Sure. Well, I think, one, if you just look at, the technology behind it. So for people who don't know, Silvio Micali is really, I think by all accounts, one of the founders of modern cryptography. A lot of the cryptographic primitives that are used in not only, cryptocurrency, but blockchains and just on the internet were designed by him and many of his students. He's invented things like zero knowledge proofs and verifiable random functions and others. And so I think really it kind of starts with him, but also we have a group of amazing researchers and scientists here. And what Algorand represents was sort of acknowledgement from a group of folks led by Silvio at MIT that Bitcoin and proof of work was phenomenally innovative, but also had challenges if you were going to scale up and have it truly be adopted by the mainstream. But at the same time, they felt that it was critically important to maintain kind of that public permissionless view and do it, but do it in a way that was more democratic overall. And so Algorand, I think if you look at many of the other projects, they're really derivative of some other project. I think Algorand is one of the first ones in a while that's launched, that's complete ground up, new tech, written from scratch, based on first principles, where we thought about, okay, what would a next gen platform look like that maintained the decentralized principles, but at the same time, could scale, have the right finality properties that we think people will need as they start to transact with larger assets, and even just the performance to be able to confirm a block in a few seconds without people having to be concerned about it. And that's where we are today. And I think we wanted to launch really as a first step in the community to show that the tech works the way it was designed. And I think we're really excited that shown that it does. But I think definitely it starts with our research team, but also I think we're one of a project that's focused not only on research, but also on delivering through our engineering team and delivering open source software that the world can use. And then separately on making sure that we have people in the project that have scaled enterprises and know how to continue to grow the project as demand increases over time. And so it's really, kind of gone through a whole process of thinking through those things.
It's pretty robust overall. Just it sounds like you guys are pretty well thought out. I like the fact that you're building proprietary technology rather than launching on another platform and just moving forward because they already have found out a lot of the unforeseen scalability issues, et cetera, et cetera. And you've certainly got a robust team working on it. So. The only other, if you could speak to this at all, the only other one after looking into your team that's got anywhere near as robust of professorial academic, that was the word I was looking for, credentials. The only one I've seen at all is Cardano. So I know they're also a proof of stake. You guys are pure proof of stake. Can you speak a little to the differences between those two systems?
I think there's probably other people who are better compare them. I think that definitely there's a similar kind of academic focus. I think the designs of our platforms are somewhat different and perhaps kind of go-to-market is a little bit different as well. I will say that I think, Algorand is really the first public permissionless platform or proof of stake platform. I know others are kind of moving in that direction. And I think that, one of the differences on our side is not only kind of where we are today, but if you look at our roadmap, we have a handful of elements that will continue to improve scale, will continue to improve functionality. We definitely feel that we need to be a place where people can develop and do so in layer one, where they have the safety and security of the protocol. And so continuing to layer on that, but also we don't really see, I'd say, other crypto projects as competitors per se. We're working on a couple of standards efforts with other projects. We think that there's kind of consistent plumbing that needs to be in place and that lots of projects can take advantage of. And so we're trying to take a thought leadership position in the community. And I think going back to something we talked about earlier, it really, I think crypto projects need to look for collaboration opportunities with each other rather than worried about competing with them. We can all fight each other with the same, tens of millions of users, but we can find the right way to grow the market and bring more people in to get excited about it. And so that's really our focus, and so we definitely welcome collaboration with anybody.
I like that.
Cardano is a great project, so we don't,
Oh, sure. No, I wasn't expecting you to bash them. I'm not trying to bash anybody here specifically. These are
Yeah.
projects that I know of that have some similarities. So, I always like to get your feedback from the people that are involved in the project's perspective.
I think they definitely they've definitely taken a thoughtful approach as well.
Yeah, we've had Charles on the channel a few times. He's always a very interesting guy to talk to. So yeah, but I mean, you guys again, quite a robust credential set on your team. So let's see, what was my next question there? Well, let's get into the token sale or the token generation event, or whatever the politically correct term is to use about this. You guys opted for a pretty interesting method. I'd never heard of a Dutch auction before this, and after reading up, it's sort of that the fair market will set the price during the course of the sale. So how did you settle on that? And tell me a little bit about that. And for the people that don't know, if you want to elaborate on the process a little bit.
Yeah, so first, I just want to back up and just make it clear to everyone. So Algorand is actually two projects. One is Algorand Inc., which is a US-based company. Our focus is on long-range research, and that's where I sit, and releasing open source software out into the world. The Algorand protocol was the first set of software that we released, along with some other cryptographic primitives, but we're continuing to do more work on that front. The Algorand Foundation is who launched that. I suggest that anyone who's checking out the project actually check out the team on both sides, because there's, I think, an equally amazing science and business team behind the Algorand Foundation who's working on that. And Algorand Foundation is based in Singapore. In terms of sort of the auction, one of the things that we noticed, if you look at some of the other methods that a lot of people launch, whether it's IEOs or ICOs, somebody has to determine the price, and typically it's either weighed more in the favor of, say, an exchange, or it's weighed more in the favor of a project. What we wanted to try to do is seek a price that let the market decide, where kind of fair value was, and really have the auction figure that out. And Dutch auctions are used in many different sales of many different financial instruments, and the idea behind it is that it's the lowest price. Everybody gets the lowest price that clears the auction, and we thought that was a better idea, where everyone gets the same price, the market sets the price, and everyone gets the lowest price that clears the sale. Those all seemed like good fundamental principles, I think, to really look at. And actually, the team wrote an auction protocol, which has been open sourced in support of that. And so, all the bids are on chain. Anytime an auction is run, and we think that other people will use the auction mechanism itself for purposes we probably haven't thought of yet.
Yeah, apologies. I meant to specify before. I was aware that Algorand Foundation and Algorand.
Yeah, no, it's okay. I just wanted to make sure I cleared it up for everybody.
Yes, absolutely. I meant to actually ask you about that first to say differentiate between the two. So apologies, got out of order,
cool.
just based on our conversation. So then, if you can speak to it a little bit, since you are not on that side of the team, let's talk about the refund policy, up to 90%. Available up to 1 year, as long as they have it from the same market. That is a very bold move, in my opinion, and something that should be pretty attractive to people that are interested into getting involved in the project. Tell me a little bit about how you're going to make sure that you stay solvent enough to live up to that policy, should people decide to, and why did you guys do this? Are you guys just that confident in the project?
Sure. So let me answer the first thing first. So the Algorand Foundation keeps all the proceeds, or all the money, subject to the refund policy in segregated accounts. They're actually going to be releasing their first audit in the coming days that shows that the money is custodied properly, and they have policies and procedures around the caretaking of that money. So that money is not subject to their operations or anything else. It's purely held in reserve to fulfill the refund policy. So that's one thing that I think everyone can have confidence in. There'll be periodic auctions released by the foundation on an ongoing basis, showing that money is custodied properly, beginning in several days. And anyone can stay tuned there, and that will be publicly available soon. The second is, I think if you go back to things that I've mentioned before a few times, bringing new users into the space, we think is critical. I think one of the concerns that people have is that obviously, it's a quite volatile market, And I think that's led some people to have concern over whether they should get involved or whether they should learn about new technology or be involved or purchase tokens. We wanted to take that element away from them so that as people are familiarizing themselves with the market, they don't have to do so with a lot of financial risk. And so the idea behind it is a way to encourage not only new people to come and learn more about Algorand, but also just to encourage new entrants into the crypto space, ones that may be interested, but still somewhat nervous. And so we felt that the combination of that, along with the Dutch auction, should lead to a market price that's both fair, but also protects people from risk because the market moves around quite a bit.
That's excuse me. That's really cool, man. I was like, when I first was reading through all of the material and looking into you guys, that was something that stuck out to me huge. And allowing the refund for up to a year afterwards, as long as they're using the same wallet. Hopefully that will help get people utilizing the token and utilizing the protocol without any fear of losing, like you said, super volatile market, 2018. A lot of people got involved in 2017 and were not prepared at all for 2018. So I think that's a really cool thing of you guys to do.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, we definitely want to encourage people to use the platform and come check it out. So, hopefully it has the desired effect. I think so far it's generated some interest.
So then, because I imagine this is your area of expertise, tell me a little bit more about your acquisition model and what kind of partners are you guys looking for? You said you wanted to look for ways to collaborate with other crypto projects. What sort of partnerships are you guys looking for? What are some of your criteria, if you can speak to that?
Yeah, sure. So I'd say it falls into kind of a few different camps. So one of the things that we look at, so we talked a lot about the fact that there's kind of a handful of users in the world that are involved in crypto and a lot that aren't. Well, the same is really true of the developer community. So if you look, there's about 20 million developers broadly kind of across the world today, and only around 100,000 of them are building on blockchain technology or trained on blockchain technology. So what we really think about is how do we go attract the rest of those people, or meaningfully a lot of them, to come in. And one of the things that we've learned, and folks who run developer relations here help build the JavaScript and WebAssembly communities for Mozilla. And the thing that developers say over and over that they really look for is simplicity. And so I think that's something that for people who are building decentralized apps, we want to make it really easy for them, create a lot of how-tos, libraries, make sure our APIs are very simple and clean and easy to use, and have lots of code examples, and really kind of help them be able to start creating applications that take advantage of decentralization, but not have to learn all of the nuts and bolts of what's going on under the hood. And we think that that's really key. So from I'd say from a DApp standpoint, that's really our focus, and it's I guess the simple way to think about it is to take an approach that's more simple or more similar to something like Stripe, than have to go learn kind of all the details of how the blockchain works. And then separately, also when we look at kind of partners who can help the ecosystem, we made an announcement a day or two ago with Flipside Crypto, who built an analytics dashboard for all of our developers so they can see how their apps are performing. We're going to have more tools coming from partners soon as well, but we really are excited to see other people contributing to the ecosystem and kind of taking that spirit of making it easy and transparent for developers to heart. So that's one piece. The second is we also see a lot of people from kind of more of the traditional finance communities that have interest in creating new types of assets, whether it's non-fungible tokens or securitized tokens. And one of the things we find is that in Turing complete smart contract languages, virtually anything that you create requires formal verification to ensure that you have something that's secure. And our view is that that's not really scalable in the long term, and it's not really what people need. So one of the things we've looked at is how do you bring more sophistication into layer one, but via a simpler smart contract language that allows people to create assets, allows people to have conditional contracts, but that doesn't expose them to the same level of security concern that they may, and takes advantage of kind of all the elements that we have in layer one. And one example of that is, we're going to be announcing soon that we partnered with ISDA, the International Swaps and Derivatives Association. We're going to have their common model inside of Algorand, so sort of many different financial instruments will be able to be created there. So it's really, I'd say for us, we look at people building DApps, adding decentralized elements to the applications they have today, building layer 2 protocols and really needing kind of layer 1 platform to build on, and then people who are really creating new assets and different asset types and want to be able to issue them somewhere, but do it without the concerns over kind of speed, scalability, security, finality that exists in a lot of the other platforms. And I think that's where kind of the underlying tech becomes really important. And so, I think that we'll see how that pans out, but so far there seems to be a lot of interest in the market in kind of the approaches we're taking, and we're excited to see so many people building on top of the platform already.
That is exciting. I mean, that's always, like you said, that's always one of the big hurdles to adoption is getting people. I say a lot, there's been a lot of people that have built roads. We need a lot more people to start building cars and things like that to start connecting these crypto cities, so to speak. So
for sure.
So let's talk about pure proof of stake a little bit. So I know, like, say for instance, there's been some massive governance issues with EOS because of the block producers being willing to accept bribes to effectively skew the vote, et cetera, et cetera. The pure proof of stake algorithm, because of the way that it selects not only the producers, but also the verifiers, correct me if I misstated that, is all random. And so there's less of a chance of this sort of collusion happening. Tell me a little bit about that process, if you can.
Sure. So I think that's.
I apologize.
No, I mean, I think that's probably, if not then for sure, one of the core innovations of Algorand. And so the protocol uses a form of cryptographic sortition, which basically means that for every block, all users who are online run a cryptographic lottery. It doesn't require a lot of computation. It takes a fraction of a second. And what that results in is one block proposer and a committee of block verifiers. And those verifiers and the proposer, none of them know who each other are, because that lottery is run in secret on their own computers. And you don't know the identity of those people until the block is already being circulated, and then you get the results. And so there's a few benefits that come with that. One, it's very difficult to know who to attack. Because the block proposer changes every block. It's random across all the users in the network, and the same is true of the verifiers. And since you don't know about them until it's already over, you have to kind of try again the next time so it creates like a very difficult, kind of attack vector for people. The second is because of that, there's only one way to get a majority. As a result, if you look at, say, proof of work, where it's follow the longest chain, you could have a conflict, in which case the miners will choose the longer chain, and so you can have finality problems. That's why it's suggested that people wait several blocks deep before they consider their payment to be reasonably final. Whereas in Algorand, as soon as a payment is on chain, it's final, because there's only one way to create the next block. And so we think some of those features are really important. But there's also a separate one, which is as a result of this system, the only speed limiter in Algorand are the speed at which blocks can be propagated around the network. And in a blockchain, you can't create the next block until the first one has been circulated. And so that's the only limit that we have. So as networks become faster, Algorand will become faster as well. In addition, we have several optimization plans that'll increase performance quite a bit. But even today, our average block takes about 4.3 seconds. We have no block has taken more than 4.5 seconds since launch. And we're running at about 1,200 transactions per second in a fully decentralized, permissionless environment, which I think is a real achievement and shows that the kind of simplicity and I think the elegance in Silvio's design to really reverse the system to where instead of the kind of network of miners running the network, it's how the end users running it that I think have really add to the security and also to the performance.
I think it's cool too that, like what you were describing in the first part, as the network scales, it's going to become even harder and harder to pull off an attack. I mean, it's fairly well impossible just by the fundamental outline of the system, but at scale, I mean, if it were a small enough network, you could maybe guess ahead of time. I mean, it would seem like an awful waste of resources, but if there's some desperate, crazy people out there that do things. But I mean, as the system scales, it basically becomes impossible, because as more and more nodes exist, it's going to be even harder and harder to predict which one of those nodes could be included in the lottery.
Yeah, that's right. As more users come online, it enhances security of the network, but it does so without hits to scalability or without the need for power or computational consumption.
Another cool thing that I was reading up on is, a lot of times, like with Bitcoin and Ethereum, and once a wallet address is created, it's there. And correct me if I misstate this, but effectively with Algorand, as soon as there's either no funds in it or less than is it 0.1 algo that's required to keep it, then that wallet address is essentially closed. So you don't end up with a huge data bog of useless wallets that are no longer being used. So that helps the scalability as well. Did I get that correct?
Yeah, that's right. I think the idea is that you don't want a collection of things that are unused, like piling up over time. And so that's something that was put into the protocol to sort of encourage the wallets that are being used to be the ones that are maintained. That others that are discarded will just get closed out. But the user, by the way, just to be clear, the user has to choose to do that to close out their account. But below is the conversion.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
So then I know you've got a hard stop coming up, so I want to be respectful of your time. My last question is just talking about keeping roadmap goals. You guys have a pretty ambitious roadmap. One of the criticisms for a lot of projects is that they fall behind their roadmap goals and then just kind of drop the ball. So what sort of steps have you guys got in place to ensure that you are hitting your roadmap as outlined?
Yeah, so I think if you look, across the team, again, it sort of goes back to how we've set things up here. I think we have not only a great engineering and research team, but we also have a great product team. We really look through milestones. We look at what it takes to get different features that we're developing done. I think one of the first proof points that we wanted was releasing the protocol and showing that the code released was very high quality. We also had it formally verified. So I think there's been a lot of good proof points that what was delivered here not only was delivered on time, was delivered at high quality. And I think as we look at kind of what the market is asking of us, we'll make sure to give time commitments and just sort of release our stuff on time. I think it's definitely possible to deliver high quality and in a timely way in the crypto world. But I think it takes, not one form of person. I think it takes a team of people that have experience doing it. And so, we look forward to continuing to contributing. And I think I'll leave you on one last note, which is, one of the reasons that we launched one with perhaps a somewhat simpler product than I think others have done, was that we wanted to get people interested in the core tech. We also wanted to hear what the market had to say about it as we continue to evolve and build on our priorities. And I think from there, if you look at the roadmap that we've laid out from a thematic standpoint, there's more interesting and I think fundamental innovation coming ahead than there is behind us. And while the protocol itself is very innovative, I think one of the reasons we encourage anyone to come find out more about the project and come start building on top is that we're going to continue to kind of match that cadence, have regular releases. Definitely we'll continue adding to our roadmap and building from there. But sort of that's a commitment from Silvio and through the whole project that we want to be seen not only as thought leaders at a point in time, but on an ongoing basis. And so definitely stay tuned. There's going to be much more coming as we continue to build things out.
Hey man, well, I appreciate you talking with us. So just so if anybody else wants to look into it, Algorand.com, Algorand.foundation, Algorand.org. Any other places out there that I haven't listed yet?
I think those are the right ones, and definitely we have social presence on Twitter and other places. People can find all that information on our website. So, really appreciate you taking some time with me today. It was great meeting you.
Absolutely, great chatting with you. And if you guys would like to come back on in the future, I'd be happy to sit down and chat with you again as new things occur. So,
cool, awesome, let's do it.
All right, right on. Thanks, Steve.
Take care. Right.
So what do you guys think? Again, Algorand is a pretty interesting project, one of the first projects in a while to be doing something original in the space, and has a very interesting team. You can learn more at the links that we stated. And what do you think of the team? Let us know. What do you think of the project? What do you think of Silvio Micali? Leave us a comment below, and we will try to respond to every comment. Thanks again for watching. Really appreciate it. Hope you guys have a great day. Again, this is Jason from Cryptosomniac. Keep your stop losses tight.